Welcome to FoxTales Movie Club. I'm Sebastian Fox.
And I'm Tony Sherman. Each video we take a chosen movie and lead a discussion on our thoughts and opinions.
We will be getting into the characters, plot, and technical achievements with no regard for spoilers.
So if you haven't seen this movie and don't want to hear said spoilers, you have been warned.
Also stick around to the end to hear the topic for our next video.
Today's movie is Spider-Man.
So Spider-Man is a movie that came out in 2002. It's directed by Sam Raimi. It has composed by Danny Elfman and stars Tobey Maguire, Willem Dafoe, James Franco, and Kirsten Dunst.
This film I'm really excited to talk about because I'm kind of a sucker for these superhero kind of movies. They're always so very fun, and a lot of them have very good messages that they try and convey throughout the film. And of course, Spider-Man is one that's filled with several of these messages. I mean, the one that everyone knows about, the phrase that Uncle Ben tells him, with great power comes great responsibility. We'll get to that eventually, I guess. But the opening credits of this film, I remember watching this when it first came out 16 years ago now, and just being blown away by the spider webs and all the webbing just kind of meshing together. I thought that was very cool, very interesting kind of.
Yeah, and I like how in the sequels they take that even further and they have this backstory like from this movie,
right?
Like in the webs,
right? Woven
so
in.
Definitely had some very good openings.
Yeah.
And this is a Marvel movie,
right?
One of the first ones that came out.
Yeah. Not
part of the MCU yet.
But I guess, I mean, it is still Spider-Man's story, so even if it's not necessarily continuing this strictly canon story, but it's definitely fitting with that kind of arc. So building those ideas, fitting with Marvel.
Yeah. And as far as I could find, this is the first Marvel movie that had the opening Marvel logo with the comics coming down and then fading to red with the logo.
Yeah. I remember every time I watch one of these Marvel movies, I just love that kind of visual because I was never really one to read comic books growing up.
Right.
But I had a lot of friends who would collect them or read them, and so just that visual of seeing all these different panels of these different comic books, very eye-catching, very visually pleasing, and it definitely was very fascinating to me to be able to see that.
Yes.
The movie starts off with the camera panning out from a spiderweb. So we have this intro opening kind of credits scene where we have the spiderwebs flinging across the screen, and then it ends with this massive spiderweb, and the camera zooms out, and we see this actual spiderweb, and we have Peter Parker.
Yeah, the monologue.
Yes, this voiceover of him asking, "Who am I? You know, what if people told you about me? If people told you I'm just an ordinary guy, this is just a happy-go-lucky kind of story, then somebody lied."
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that we see right away kind of jumping into this idea of a superhero's life. While it might be really awesome to have superpowers and be able to swing around New York City, or to be able to fly in some kind of Iron Man suit or whatever it is, having these powers,
right.
It's a difficult life, right?
And especially for Spider-Man being the teenager superhero, and his comics tend to be a lot about him dealing with balancing his social life and
academic school life, and then the superhero life, and trying to keep that hidden from those around him, trying to protect those around him. Yeah,
I found it interesting with the voiceover. It ends with him saying that this story is about MJ.
Yeah, it's a story about the girl next door.
Yeah,
which is kind of funny. It's like, is it why is this a story about Mary Jane? It's Spider-Man. That's the name of the movie. It should be about Spider-Man.
Well, I mean, it ends with him not being able to be with her because he kind of learns that he's putting people in danger. They're close to him.
Yeah.
So I kind of get that from his perspective. This is kind of him learning about he needs to keep her at a distance.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So we see that's kind of the thing. And several of the other Marvel movies and several other superhero movies try and deal with this idea in other ways. But this idea of if we're a superhero, do we have this identity that we try and keep hidden? How do we protect those that are close to us? And so Spider-Man, whether it's a good idea or not, Spider-Man Peter Parker decides, well, the best way to keep those close to me safe is to kind of just push them away.
Yeah.
So whether that's a healthy kind of way to approach that kind of decision.
Yeah.
But it is a dangerous world for the Amazing Spider-Man, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's one thing. It doesn't say where that came from. The friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yeah.
That name just kind of shows up.
Yeah. We see that a few times. He goes about and saves a few people, and the neighborhood kind of grows to know who he is, and kind of put him in this good light, saying, "Oh yeah, he's helping us out." But then we also have J. Jonah Jameson and a few other people. Some of the civilians, some of the people around the neighborhood see him as this vigilante, as this troublemaker, especially J. Jonah Jameson, saying that he's going so far as to say that he's not just a troublemaker but a criminal.
Yes.
And it's kind of interesting. It's like, what's happened to J. Jonah Jameson that he's gotten so upset with Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Why is he so uptight?
Yeah, I like how the movie plays with the sort of the city's perception of Spider-Man throughout the entire movie, though. Because when he first starts out, it seems mostly positive.
Right.
But then as he kind of continues going, he kind of favor falls out with, especially with Jonah's magazines.
Yeah.
But then at the end, the scene of the bridge, the citizens all kind of help out.
Rally together. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I feel like that's something that's pretty common, is that, well, we might not like each other at certain points, but we're going to have to rally together against a common enemy. So you might not like Spider-Man under certain circumstances, but if he's going to be saving what was this? It was like a trolley. What do you call those?
Cable car.
Cable car full of kids. Cable car full of kids on this school field trip or whatever it was. If he's going to be saving children, of course you have to side on Spider-Man's side. The transformation scene and the events leading up to that transformation scene, I think, were very interesting as well.
Yeah.
I feel like the idea of in the story, how do we tell the audience where these superpowers come from, is kind of an interesting idea, and it's very telling for the culture as a whole during the time of telling this story. So like some of the other superheroes, like the Hulk, we're talking about like gamma radiation in a time where nuclear power and all this kind of like atomic weapons and these kind of ideas are kind of at the forefront. So it's kind of like, this is a scary thing, but maybe it's a good thing because it came about with this superhero.
Yeah, and in the comics, Peter was also bitten by a radioactive spider.
Right,
so
radioactive spiders. Yeah,
there.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not different that they changed it here. It wasn't just. It was more of a.
It was like genetics.
Genetically created spider.
Yeah, which fits with more modern kind of science that nowadays we're not really as interested or fascinated by nuclear power. It's not something that's new necessarily or on the forefront of this technology, but this idea of being able to genetically engineer organisms to have different kinds of powers, or you have these 15, I think it was 12 or 15 different spiders?
I think it was 14.
14? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that they put together to try and create this super spider.
Yeah.
So like that's where the technology is. That's where the science is today. So it kind of fits with the way the origin story kind of goes.
Although it does seem kind of strange because it seems like with the radioactive spider, like it was just a spider that kind of came in accidentally into there. So it made sense that he was the only one that got these powers. But now that they have these 14 different spiders, surprising that no one else.
Yeah. It's like how in the world do you let one of the spiders out?
Yeah.
It's like it was interesting looking at this scene of when they're touring this science facility from the eyes of science kind of background.
Right.
And it's like, this does not seem at all well done. It's like you have people just walking around, no kind of protective gear or anything, just walking right next to this massive, probably multi-million-dollar equipment. So it's like, this doesn't seem accurate. Makes for a cool kind of scene and set up for a cool interaction, but whatever.
Even the setting itself seems kind of weird. It looks more like a library or a museum.
Right, a museum almost.
It's not, not as clean as you would think a laboratory would be. Especially around an electron microscope.
Exactly.
Anything.
Yeah, I was thinking they would have like just white walls, everything's white, no windows or anything, but whatever. But when we see the spider dropping down towards Peter Parker, and when it bites him, they were just talking about how we have these genetically engineered super spiders and that they're venomous and dangerous potentially, and he gets bit and then just goes home.
Yeah.
He doesn't say anything to
And it looks pretty bad too. It's,
like immediately after the bite, it's already starting to swell and turn red. And it's like, okay, all right, Peter. You're a little smarter than that, I think.
Yeah. So when they're arriving at this laboratory, you meet the character of Harry Osborn. You get to see him and Peter together a little bit, see their friendship.
And his father as well, Norman Osborn, gets introduced.
Yeah.
So, kind of an interesting friendship. I wonder what the basis for their connection was.
Yeah.
Because it kind of, you have this implication that Harry is well off. He's been going to all these private schools. So somewhat recently transferred into this public school that Peter Parker's at. So it doesn't seem like the two characters would necessarily meld together very well.
Well, they did both kind of seem like outcasts, sort of. Like they were both kind of pushed aside.
Yeah.
This one was too good for everyone. The other one
was like bullied. Like we see in that very opening scene when he's trying to chase after the bus.
Yeah.
And no one...
Even by the bus driver.
Even the bus driver doesn't stop to let him on. Yeah, so that's a good point, that they do kind of appear as somewhat as outcasts. So maybe kind of bonding over this idea of we're different. Peter Parker doesn't have parents, so he's living in a different kind of lifestyle, home style. So that's already something that's maybe causing some kind of emotional changes for him, and he's different from the other kids. And then Harry, on the other end of the scale, he has this family that's super wealthy and can provide anything that he wants,
right.
But they are kind of different in that Harry doesn't necessarily want all this money or this wealth. He even mentions, do we really have to show up to the field trip in the Rolls Royce?
Right.
So he kind of not necessarily looked down on, but is not quite too enthused by appearing as this upper echelon kind of class.
Yeah, but he is very, he does look up to his father still.
Yeah.
Even though throughout the entire movie he does kind of say he's not a great person, he still looks up to him as well.
Yeah. We see several times where he gets upset with his father and kind of snaps at him, but it always comes back to him and his father are in a very loving kind of relationship, and he cares a lot about his father, and his father cares a lot about his well-being. but other circumstances come into play in Norman Osborn's life that kind of eventually cut him out of Harry's life.
Yeah.
We see the first time that we see Norman Osborn, he mentions to Peter Parker that he's a bit of a scientist himself.
Right.
And when we see him at his work at Oscorp, even named after him, Norman Osborn, he's trying to develop, similarly to maybe the genetically engineered super spiders, he's trying to genetically engineer, chemically change these lab rats.
More advanced genetic,
Yeah, and except it's kind of a different outcome, a different kind of intent, where he's trying to do it because the military wants to have these superhumans, right? Have these military powerful kind of units to be able to take over places. So.
Yeah, it never really gets into his motivation of why he gets into science and sort of that, because it gets all of the what's the word for the conflict there is that comes from just him. He's going to lose funding, but it doesn't actually get into like why he wanted to look into science in the first place, because it feels like he got funding from the military just to get the money. He wasn't like looking out to make it.
Yeah, he seems like he mentions that he's somewhat of a scientist, but it almost seems as if he comes across as more of like a businessman more than a scientist. Even when they realize, they're going to cut our funding, let's move forward with human testing. That scene where he's deciding, well, I'm going to go through this human testing myself.
Right.
He lists off a couple chemicals and takes them and then just swigs them down, just drinks these chemicals, as in like, that's exactly how chemicals work. And then one of the main things, of course, it's for the movie, it's for the visual, it's a very cool effect, but inhalation of drugs, especially if you're in such a large chamber like that, you can't control the dosage, you can't control how much is he going to be breathing in. And if he breathes in all of that, that's probably going to be way too high of a dosage. It would probably, have like some kind of mask on him, or just inject it into the bloodstream.
I feel like that's something that the early 2000s did a lot of, where they just kind of went for style over actual thinking through how this stuff would work.
How it would work, Which, to their credit, I feel like a lot of them more recent Marvel movies do a lot better job of that, of looking at, trying to convey the science in a more realistic fashion. But you definitely do have to kind of think about the balance between the showmanship of the scene and the aesthetic of the scene, and also the realism of, well, how realistic can we get if we're talking about these superpowers and superhumans and stuff like that.
Getting back to Harry and Peter, I've found it interesting the way that the movie portrays their friendship, and some of the other relationships too.
Right.
Just kind of, it throws you in and gives you like a couple lines where it shows that they're close friends, but then throughout the entire movie they're kind of more at odds with each other, with Harry not telling Peter about MJ.
Right.
Yeah, and Peter hiding everything
with his life. Yeah, all of that. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting that they do seem very close, but I guess maybe because the relationship's a much more recent one, they bonded quickly, but then didn't necessarily have the depth of the relationship to feel comfortable talking about some of these deeper issues.
Right.
Yeah.
Although some of the, I don't know if it's actually that recent, because some of the things that Harry says, like he said when his dad asked him about Peter's love life, he says that he was in love with MJ since like the 6th grade.
That's true. So maybe it's been they talked at least a little bit about that to some degree, and he knows about that to some degree. Yeah.
So the character of MJ.
Yes.
Very, very different from the comics version. In the comics, she was very popular girl. She was a lot more outgoing.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting that they changed her in that way.
Yeah, that at the start, it almost feels like she's part of that crowd.
Yeah.
She's with these jocks and she's with this popular girl kind of crowd. But when we see her, and she's talking to Peter in the backyard after her fight with her father, we see kind of another side of her as a person, as a character, that she has these desires. She doesn't want to just be this popular girl who, goes along with the flow and finds a husband and goes on with her life. But she wants to be on Broadway. She wants to act. She has had this dream her whole life, just about. It seems.
And acting since the first grade. So,
Cinderella cried like a baby.
Yeah, I like that scene in the backyard because it feels very real, just their conversation between her and Peter. But then as soon as Flash gets there with his car, you see her change. Going back to that, more hiding who she really is.
Yeah, I feel like that's understandable.
Yeah,
with them being high school students, even adults, everyone wears these masks to some degree, depending on who it is that they're dealing with or speaking with. That, like, well, I have to portray myself this way or that way. I have to portray myself as the popular good girlfriend. I need to portray myself as this person who's able to provide for the family, even though the military is going to be dropping their funding. So we have all these people who have these pressures and these ideals put upon them that can be difficult to deal with.
Yeah. I thought that MJ, her character was, one interesting character moment with her was when, at the beginning, Peter asks her to pose for a picture for the school paper.
Yeah.
And you can see her just kind of, like, acting, like she's holding up the...
Pointing.
I like that in that moment, you don't even know that she's an actress yet, but it has that bit of character.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a little bit of that foreshadowing of, this is something that when she does mention that she's interested in acting, if you've picked up on that, it doesn't come out of left field. It's like, oh, well, yeah, she did have that kind of portrayal. She had a little bit of that kind of fascination with, all right, how am I presenting myself? How am I posing for the camera? So we do see that. Yeah, that's a good point. Going back to the school, we see that Peter Parker had been bullied, and we see one of the main bullies is MJ's then boyfriend, Flash.
Yes.
And like you were saying, the scene in the backyard when Flash shows up with his new convertible, his new car, Peter even says to himself, nice car, he mentions the car, and then in his mind he's thinking, all right, what can I do? How can I go about getting some kind of car? What can I do to become a little bit more flashy? And
flashy.
And we see him go through the paper and find this ad for this wrestling kind of deal. And he thinks, well, this is perfect. I've got these powers where I can kind of have super strength. I can swing webs. I can climb on things.
Yeah.
I think I could handle a little bit of wrestling to get $3,000. And this lead up to the culmination of this final outcome of this group of scenes is one that's kind of the epitome, kind of the quintessence, if you will, of what is the backbone for Spider-Man's character and his arc of his relationship with his uncle.
Yeah.
So we see, due to the spider bite and due to some of the bullying and other things, Uncle Ben recognizes, as any kind of father would, that something's going on with Peter. Let me talk with him. Let's try and figure out what's going on. And again, typical of any teenage boy, he doesn't want to hear it.
Right. Yeah.
He wants to be in control. He wants to be the one who's kind of able to do whatever it is that he's wanting. He can handle it.
Yeah, and he feels that his uncle just wouldn't understand
right
what he's going through.
Right. And of course, Uncle Ben says, I went through the same exact things that you're going through now. And they're not quite on the same page there. But yeah, so Peter's thinking, you don't understand, there's something really weird going on here. And he's already maybe thinking about, this isn't something that I can easily share with anyone.
Right. Yeah.
So he's already kind of thinking about, how would I even try and broach this topic? But we get the one of the main lines of the film, one of the main themes, I would even say, of the film, with Uncle Ben's line of, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah. One they've shied away from in the newer series.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
interesting to see, like, I wonder the reasoning behind that would be.
Yeah.
Why they don't necessarily touch upon that.
But yeah, definitely it's a good line that really defines the character of Peter Parker and Spider-Man.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so understanding what responsibility means and what kind of sacrifices have to come into play in order to live up to that responsibility.
Right.
Yeah. And we see one of Peter Parker's biggest blunders is when he feels slighted by the wrestling manager.
Yes.
And the guy doesn't pay him out the whole amount of money. He thinks, well, this guy just came in to rob them. I'm not responsible for that.
Right.
You know, whoever said that this was my problem. So he decides, I'm just going to let him go.
Yeah.
You know, a little bit of karma. Again, karma ends up coming to bite him.
Yeah.
No pun intended there.
Yeah, and I like when the guy comes up and says, "Why did you let him go?" He has that little bit of sort of Spider-Man quip to him where he throws his line back in his face.
Throws the line back in his face.
Because
exactly.
Normally you don't see Peter Parker using that quippiness as much.
Yeah, yeah, and growing up and playing some of the video games and the limited familiarization I have with the comics, it was like that's kind of something that I always thought was really interesting. That he's got this wit about him.
Yes.
That doesn't really come through necessarily very often in some of the films. So it was very funny to see him try and throw that line back in the guy's face. Yeah. After Peter Parker allows this robber to leave with the money, he goes back to try and find his uncle.
Right.
And that's when we find out there's this crowd, there's these police officers, there's the lights flashing, and Peter finds out that his uncle's been shot. He goes off to try and find this person who shot his uncle.
Yeah.
And fights with him, and then has the realization when he holds the man up into the light that it was
the guy that he didn't stop.
That he didn't stop. So it's almost kind of like an immediate reiteration of an immediate application of, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
He had the power to stop this person from robbing them, and the consequences of not doing so led to him losing one of the greatest persons in his life, the person that raised him as a father. So,
yeah, I think this is definitely a very, very simple and very well done superhero origin. Just that part of it, of his uncle kind of giving him, telling him how to live his life, and then he realizes how true it is.
Right. Yeah. And from then on, he tries his best, for good or bad, to live up to that.
Yeah.
Live up to what he believes Uncle Ben would have wanted for him. So, trying to protect those around him, I feel like that puts a lot of responsibility then onto him
Yeah.
maybe unnecessarily, not necessarily trusting those around him and saying, well, I can't perfectly protect these people if they know, and if these villains know who I am or who's close to me.
Right.
So he just completely isolates himself. So we see...
yeah, that's kind of something you don't really see very much in superhero things anymore. Typically, even if they have a secret identity, typically there's at least one person that knows from the beginning.
Yeah, like even in like Lucius Fox in Batman with Bruce Wayne.
Or in the newest Spider-Man, there's Ned.
Right.
Acts as the guy in the chair.
The guy in the chair, yeah. So we have a little bit of a difference there where it's kind of like a sad existence for Peter Parker in this set of movies where he's like, well, if I'm wanting to do this thing, I can't have these relationships. I can't be with these people. So definitely leads to a little bit of a darker kind of interaction between Peter and some of the other characters that he's close to.
Right, yeah. Yeah, speaking of the newer versions of Spider-Man, I kind of I like looking at how they portray the different Peter Parkers and such. Yeah. Because I feel like this one does a very good job of portraying his like awkward genius nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas like Garfield was he kind of was socially awkward sometimes, but he was a lot more of a cooler character as Peter Parker, which and then Tom Holland does a great job as playing like an awkward kid, but
he feels more like the high schooler kind of kid. Oh my gosh, I just got powers, let me go do, I want to go fight bad guys, I want to go swing around the city, and like has that energy about him.
I feel like it doesn't play up the genius part as much. Like it shows that he knows like a lot of facts with him being like the best student for the academic decathlon or something like that. He knows that, but it doesn't, like with his powers and the suit, it doesn't seem like he makes the web, I guess, but that's about the extent of showing him being a genius.
Which is also kind of an interesting thing of how they portray some of these powers of like, are these, is the web something that is created from within them as like this superhero? Do they have like cartridges that they have like this webbing built in, and they have some kind of mechanism that shoots out the web? And so that's something as well that's kind of an interesting different way of presenting how these powers incorporate themselves within the character.
Yeah, I definitely find it strange in this one that it is organic, like he makes the web from his body rather than like him creating the cartridges, because this one's sort of the most comic accurate. Yeah. But it has that difference, which is kind of strange.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's definitely a little bit different there. Yeah. But very interesting to have three pretty different portrayals of the Spider-Man character in about 15 or so years. So very, very interesting that they had all these different ones, whereas some of the other characters, they haven't necessarily done that. They did that with the Hulk. We've had a few different Hulks.
A couple different,
Yeah. We've had a few different Batmans if we go to DC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Spider-Man just seems like he's bigger, kind of, just a lot of people watch his movies and everyone knows who he is.
Yeah. So yeah. Interesting.
Seems stranger that they keep rebooting it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When he first gets those powers and recognizes that he has this weird webbing on his wrist, he's trying to figure out, what is this? Where's it coming from? How do I use this? And he throws out a couple interesting lines.
Yeah, when he's trying to shoot the web.
Right. Yeah. So, and we see some kind of interesting shout-outs.
He tries a few different hand motions,
gestures.
And he says things like up and away web and Shazam, both of which are DC references. Kind of interesting.
Yeah. So like, why are they wanting to put DC in with Marvel's? Is that allowed? Maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, very interesting the way they have him learn about his powers and learn about how they work. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely like the scene where he's learning that he can climb walls.
Yeah.
And the way that it's shot with him actually down on the ground and the camera going around him looked very nice.
Yeah.
Thought a lot of the I liked a lot of the visuals in this movie, like the spider sense visuals were interesting.
Yeah.
Because you don't see the spider sense as much in the newer movies, but this one just kind of has a good sound that it plays.
It has that little stinger, that sound thrown in there, and it has kind of that kind of almost like a zoom, slow motion kind of feel to it, where it's like, whoa, something's happening. So yeah, we do see that. Speaking of powers, looking at Norman Osborn's powers that he ends up getting.
Yeah.
And as he becomes the Green Goblin through this failed chemical kind of gas that he breathes in, do you think that regardless of whether he had breathed in these chemicals that were creating paranoia and insanity within the rats, do you think he would have still gone off the deep end even without doing that? We see a little bit of that instability early on, even before he's taken in some of the gas. Yeah,
he does seem to hold it back a little bit more, because when the generals are there talking to him, and the guy says that they need to take the serum back to formula.
Back to formula.
He kind of and he double takes with him, but he doesn't do anything there.
Right. Yeah. So it might be.
But I don't know. Maybe if that that experiment where he was testing on himself, if that wasn't going well, maybe that pushed him over the edge. It wasn't just the serum.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So there might have already been some kind of issues there in this. Without the serum, he would have been able to maybe handle it to some degree, but this definitely pushed it to an extent that kind of broke his psyche.
Yeah.
And we see several scenes where we have that interesting depiction of that dual kind of mannerisms of this of Norman, and this kind of broken identity between him and the Green Goblin.
Yeah.
One scene where we have the mask sitting on top of the chair, and then another when he first starts to realize when this is happening. He talks into the mirror.
It's a very Gollum Smeagol
exactly.
type feel to it.
Even the facial expression made me think of, oh my goodness, this is really kind of Andy Serkis, Gollum Smeagol kind of feel to it. So very interesting kind of way of shooting that to get that feel of this is the same person, but it's not really the same person.
Willem definitely did a good job of playing crazy as the Goblin.
Yeah, definitely a very good character choice. Very good choice of picking this.
Person. Good casting.
Yeah.
You see, even before he turns into the Goblin,
right,
in his house, he has a lot of masks.
A lot of different masks. Yeah. So we already are getting this kind of this shielding, this masking of who is this person. We have this eccentricity of, he's got all these different figurines and masks, so it's like a little bit of mystery about his character, but it's also a little bit of the symbolism of who he is as a person and how he kind of tries to come across differently when he first meets Peter Parker versus when he's with Harry versus when he's with Mary Jane, or even when he's with Aunt May in the Thanksgiving scene, and she scolds him for getting into the I think it was the sweet potatoes with the marshmallow or something like that, and she scolds him, and he almost has that second of where he's gonna snap, but then pulls back.
Yeah.
So
he also seems to think that other people have masks because the way that he treats Mary Jane, he tells Harry that she's just there after the money. She's not actually. Yeah.
Not actually someone who cares about Harry, doesn't, love him or care about him as a person. Is only there after this fund, this trust fund, this inheritance and all this money. So the perception that the different characters have towards each other and towards the other characters is definitely something that plays off interestingly, and we have this weird kind of miscommunication, disconnect, where even between Harry and Peter Parker, they don't communicate necessarily to the level where if they had just talked about it a little bit more, a lot of the conflict in the movie and a lot of conflict in the future movies could have been resolved much more simply.
Yeah. Continuing with masks and clothes and stuff at that Thanksgiving scene, it's kind of interesting because both Norman and Peter are wearing each other's clothes because Norman's wearing a blue shirt. I think it's a blue shirt with a red tie.
Okay.
And Peter's wearing a green shirt.
Yeah.
Which is just interesting that they flipped colors.
Color scheme switched. That's interesting. Yeah. So we see that kind of, what might that kind of symbolize if we're having the antagonist-protagonist switch identities through their clothing, through their color scheme.
Yeah.
And we do talk about how the clothing makes the man, makes the character. So by switching the clothes that they're wearing, does that try and symbolize maybe like a distinction between protagonist antagonist kind of shift or not? But I feel like it's pretty clear they don't take it that far to switch any of those roles.
Yeah, I'd heard people talk about that before, but one thing with clothing at Thanksgiving that I hadn't heard people talk about was MJ. Because earlier in the movie, Harry says a line when they're at the festival.
The World Unity Festival.
Yeah.
She's wearing
a red dress, and he asked her why she didn't wear the black dress, because his dad likes black.
Yeah.
And she's like, maybe he'll just like me for me.
Yeah.
But then when MJ actually meets his father, she is wearing black.
She is wearing the black. So
I don't know if Harry convinced her of that.
Yeah. Or maybe she just wanted to wear black.
Yeah.
No, I feel like that's a good catch, that maybe MJ's trying to appease Harry and appease Norman, saying, let me try and get onto the good side, but also at the same time hoping that Norman's going to like her for who she is and who she is to Harry. But very quickly during that scene, we see Norman scolding Harry for associating with her. So we see a clear cut where MJ and Harry, their relationship is already starting to shatter and start to break, because Harry, of course, sides with his father.
Yeah.
That's his father, whom he loves and admires. He has to, see his father as a good person, even if his father's views are misguided.
Right.
Yeah.
One character we haven't talked about, we probably should, is the character of J. Jonah Jameson.
J. Jonah Jameson, yes. I need photos. Photos of Spider-Man, yes. Yeah, he's very interesting, and again, perfect casting.
Yes.
Going with J.K. Simmons. Man.
They've stayed away from that character in all of the movies since.
Ever since, yeah. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The perfect image of who you vision when you're thinking of J. Jonah Jameson. And also the mannerisms and how he responds and deals with his coworkers, his employees is spot on. Yeah. It's an interesting character that he right away sees Spider-Man as this bad person.
Yeah.
And I guess, you can understand to some degree, it's like, well, if the superhero is such a good person, why are they hiding behind this mask? Why are they
Plus, he
wearing
is
this
a
costume?
vigilante. It's breaking the law.
It's true. It is breaking the law. But, the whole idea of, well, superheroes, superhumans, is it against the law for, like they're trying to save the day, but again, who decides to what extent does might make right, kind of thing, right?
One interesting thing with JJ is just like his character. He's very seems very self-serving, and he seems to be portrayed as sort of not a very good person. But then when the Green Goblin comes to talk to him, he's very quick to hide who Peter is.
Peter Parker.
The Goblin asks who the
Who's
person
the
who's taking. Yeah, who's the photographer?
Right.
And he says that the photos come in the mail. He
Right.
doesn't know.
Yeah, and it comes across so naturally.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't even have to he doesn't hesitate, doesn't even think about it. He's like, photos come in, I don't know who it is.
Yeah.
And so it's like, he has that kind of cynical kind of, attitude where he's, against the world, almost kind of thing. But he clearly does care about his employees and cares about, those that are around him. So like even a angry, kind of belligerent JJ we see kind of has a heart of gold, whether he wants to admit it or not.
Yeah.
So we have some interesting scenes early on in the film as well, where we have kind of this coming of age story for Peter as well as Harry and MJ, where we kind of see their growth going from, they're high school teenagers into whatever age they are by the end of the movie. It seems as if there's some kind of time jump. But we definitely see a very stark contrast with Peter Parker immediately after getting bit.
Yeah.
He gets back to his home and says hi to his aunt and uncle and then goes straight up to his room.
Yeah.
And we have an interesting shot where he takes off his shirt and we see in the mirror I think the next scene's in the mirror, but here the camera just pans up and we see a scrawny 16-year-old boy, or what should have been a scrawny 16-year-old boy, and he wraps himself up in this blanket, almost kind of like cocoon-like, which I don't think spiders really do cocoons, but it's an insect metaphor maybe. And once he wakes back up the next morning, that's when we see him looking in the mirror. He takes his glasses off, he puts his glasses on, and his vision's okay, and he sees these muscles all of a sudden that he didn't have just 12 hours before. So we see a very stark contrast with this kind of coming of age, this pubescence kind of thing taking place here.
I also find it interesting there because they're cutting back between that and Norman's transformation. And he also takes his shirt off, which doesn't really seem to serve a purpose, but it definitely does this where it kind of mirrors the two. Yeah,
so we see that change. Like, I was thinking, he's taking off his shirt so he can expose the vein so they can inject the serum into him. And it's like, nope, they just like close down these clamps on his body. And he's like, oh, it's cold. Yeah, it's cold. And then goes into this like gas chamber of sorts. So we see kind of like this contrast, this similarity between the two in their transformation sequences, but one has quite a big difference, and the other one starts off already kind of physically built a bit more and mentally unhinged already. So we see that the change for Norman, while is also quite a big change, maybe not as much of a change compared to the change that we can see in Peter.
Yeah. With the editing, I found a lot of little things interesting, because Sam Raimi had done a lot of horror
Okay. Yeah.
And you definitely a lot of people point to the second movie where Doc Ock is there with the surgeons and his arms go after them. But in the first movie, you kind of see it come through a little bit too, like when Peter's stalking that guy at the beginning that shot Uncle Ben.
Right.
And he gets to that warehouse. You can kind of see the
you
horror
see the
coming.
shadow as he sneaks down. Yeah.
And then like the blood drop scene when he's on the ceiling and Norman comes up, just very well executed.
Yeah. And we get a couple of those, especially with Norman and him having that kind of like mental break. We get those little flashes of the Green Goblin coming through, and kind of these weird, almost kind of like animal screams or howls coming through. So we see a lot of that kind of horror-esque kind of shots that jump out in certain scenes.
Yeah, also I found other editing things interesting in this movie because it's very early 2000s.
Yes. Yeah.
Where like when Peter's looking at the car ads, he finds one that he likes. That, like it shows him, but then it has like MJ's face kind of fade in, and the car kind of fade in over his shoulder, and it just it seems very early 2000s there.
Yeah, it has just kind of that feel to it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also kind of found with the editing, it was a bit weird that a lot of the scenes, there's not really any lead up to them. They just kind of start.
Yeah. Just kind of almost in media res, just kind of.
Yeah.
All right, now we're back at the apartment and we're preparing for Thanksgiving. All right, now we're here at the World Unity Festival and there's these balloons and parades and everything going on. So yeah, it's just kind of like scene to scene kind of cuts. Yeah. Yeah,
it ends up working, but it just kind of seems like it could have been done a little bit better.
Maybe, yeah.
Although at the very end they do kind of lead in because Peter realizes that MJ is in danger.
Right.
And then he gets the call from Green Goblin. He has to head to the bridge.
Yes. Yeah. And we have, again, a very, I don't want to use the word cliche, but I just did. But we have a very kind of standard superhero kind of choice here, and very Spider-Man kind of choice, where we have the villain has the children in one hand, the love interest in the other hand, and then you have to choose. Yeah. And of course,
they always choose both.
They always choose both. I mean, what else could you do? How could you even possibly write a story where they choose one over the other?
Yeah.
Oh man. But I don't know. It's funny when he's first choosing, you see him running towards the camera and the trolley car, the cable car is falling in the background. So you see him, forget those kids, I'm going for Mary Jane. And so you get a little bit of that kind of coming through. But then clearly swinging back around.
Yeah, like right before that, when you, like right after the Goblin drops both of them, you see a shot of like the Spider-Man from the front, and in both eyes you see the different things falling.
Yeah, a very cool kind of shot where you can now see, well, even he's seeing the decision that he has to make.
Yeah.
And so he's thinking, well, what's going to be the best way out of this? How am I going to try and save both what's representing the people, the city, that's who he became Spider-Man for, and Mary Jane, who he's been in love with his whole life.
Yeah.
So, two very big things that he can't really drop the ball on either one. And of course, it'd be very interesting to see what would happen if he were to fail.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a very interesting way of developing a story of, well, what do we do with a fallen hero, someone who's failed to hold up their end of the deal, hold up what they have been tasked with.
Yeah, Goblin says something about that halfway through. He says that people thing that people enjoy more than a hero is a fallen hero.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's an interesting kind of thing that they then go on to try and do in the third film, where they have Peter Parker kind of go into this darker side and go into this fallen hero kind of story. So maybe we'll be able to talk about that at some point once we get to that one.
So when they get to the graveyard,
yes,
kind of an interesting setting there.
Yeah,
and a very different sort of fight scene than the rest of the.
Yeah,
feels a lot more, just I guess real almost, because it's just the two of them fighting without much.
Yeah. It's almost kind of just a little bit of brute force for most of the fight, where they're just wailing at each other, just trying to get at each other, rather than necessarily using what comes naturally to them with their powers.
Yeah. There is one strange moment in that fight where the goblin gets Peter up against a wall, and then he just kind of has this spear he pulls out of nowhere and tries to stab him, and it plays this moment where Peter kind of like has to, I think it's where the goblin tells him that he's going to go after MJ, so Peter gets angry and fights back, and then the spear just kind of flies off and it doesn't really go anywhere. It just disappears. Yeah. And I was wondering if there was just more to that scene that was cut out.
That's true. Yeah. It was maybe some kind of deleted scene that they had to edit out and they had to cut at the very end.
So now there's just a spear that just comes out of nowhere.
That Green Goblin just has spears, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, that's interesting. But we do see that in the end, Spider-Man keeps his wits about him and uses his spider cunning to overpower and overcome Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin, because right at the very end of this fight, the mask comes off for both of them pretty much. Yeah. Spider-Man's mask is torn up, and the Green Goblin takes his mask off to say, mercy, it's me, it's Norman, and you're my family too. I want you. The Green Goblin's making me do this. I don't want to really do this. And, of course, all of it is just this ploy to try and
although I actually kind of was wondering if maybe it isn't almost, because maybe he is wanting Peter to help him, but then since Peter doesn't, the Goblin's able to take over again, maybe.
That's true. I
don't think so. I don't think that's how it's shown, but it could be. But yeah. It's an interesting, because it's such a quick change from I'm Norman to Godspeed Spider-Man, and shooting off his glider to try and pierce Spider-Man with its spikes. Yeah. And of course you can't catch Spider-Man off guard. He's got the spider sense. Yeah. Slow-mo zoom in, and he does this flip and gets out of the way, but poor Norman gets impaled. Yeah. And then Norman has a bit of a moment of clarity, it seems. Yeah. And his last words, don't tell Harry. Yeah. I don't want Harry to know. Harry had looked up to him. He didn't want to let Harry down. Yeah. But unfortunately, how Peter Parker ends up handling this scenario of, well, I'm just going to take the dead body back to Norman's house. Yeah. And so Harry, of course, walks in and sees Spider-Man there next to his father's body and reaches the natural conclusion of, oh my goodness, Spider-Man just killed my dad. Yeah. Which is a terrifying thought. Yeah, this movie definitely ends a lot of things on a sour note with Harry kind of mistrusting Spider-Man and Peter leaving MJ saying that he can't be with her.
Yeah, so Harry just can't catch a break through this whole movie. No. The poor boy. Yeah. And then when we get to the cemetery, the final scene where they're burying Norman Osborn, we have that last interaction between the three main characters, between Harry and Peter, and then Peter and MJ, to try and wrap everything up with these interactions between the characters and see how they change throughout the movie. where are they at now? So the interaction between Harry, I thought, was especially interesting.
Yeah.
With Harry saying, "I'm so glad that you're still here, Peter.
Yeah.
I've lost my father, but
You're the only family I have.
You're the only family I have." And of course, the dramatic irony is that we as the audience know, oh man, poor Harry. If only he knew. Peter is the one who was responsible partly for Norman's death. So
yeah, I think this movie does a very good job of ending this story, but still setting things up for
future arcs. Yes.
Leaving things open.
Right. Which is very natural and very realistic. That, I mean, the real world does not have, cookie cutter, clear endings where once upon a time things started and everyone lived
happily ever
after. The end.
Yeah.
And close the book. Yeah. It makes it feel very natural the way they end the film. And then the last few lines with Peter and MJ.
Yeah.
So we see MJ throughout the film. She was with Flash, and then we have this time jump. She's with Harry.
Yeah.
And then conflicting emotions arise, and she's starting to fall for Spider-Man, but how can she be with Spider-Man? He's some superhero. No one knows who he is. And then, of course, by the end, somehow everything tumbles back around, and she's completely fallen for Peter now.
Yeah.
But again, the line, with great power comes great responsibility, comes to Peter's mind, and he has to step away.
Yeah.
Yeah. We see him reject those advances of MJ, saying that I can be there for you.
I'll always be your friend.
But only as a friend. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though. I wonder, by staying as a friend to MJ, he's staying close to her, and she's clearly still going to be a very important person to Peter.
Yeah, especially you see in the other movies, he still hangs around her quite a bit, tries to go to all of her plays.
So him trying to distance himself to protect her ends up not even being what ends up happening. That he still ends up, even if they're not necessarily dating or romantically involved, they're still very close and would still be a weakness for the Spider-Man if any villains were to find this out.
Yeah, this movie definitely sets up a lot that can be continued. Earlier, it had the line where Peter was he found a job after graduating for a Kurt Connors, and then he got fired halfway through. But Kurt Connors is a villain from Spider-Man comics. He's the Lizard,
right?
And he was name dropped in a few of the other following ones.
Right,
he was even seen, I think, in Spider-Man 3.
Yeah,
and he was going to be the villain in the fourth one. Never happened.
Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, we'll never know. But so. It's nice. I think it's always a nice thing that the people who write these stories and produce these stories are thinking about, okay, well, what can we do to hook in other characters, other ideas, other story arcs for future things. That way it's not just, oh, yeah, this is happening now. But it's this natural kind of world building idea.
Yeah.
So they do a very good job of that throughout the film. Setting up the sequels. So, we are going to be introducing a new set of videos that we're going to be uploading.
Yes, usually we only upload on the first and third Tuesdays of each month, but on months when there's going to be a fifth Tuesday, we've thought it would be interesting to do videos like we've been doing, but with a wider variety of topics.
Right, so we're going to be doing some R-rated movies like Blade Runner, Shawshank Redemption. Going to do some TV shows potentially.
Yeah.
So some things new, some things different.
Yeah, this month we're planning on doing, on the 5th Tuesday, reviewing Blade Runner 2049. So stay tuned for that, and then we will get back to our regular
scheduled program. All right, thank you.
That will do it for this video. We would like to thank Mill Eastup for creating our opening theme.
And join us in the comment section below to go over any questions or add to the discussion on Spider-Man.
And subscribe so you don't miss our next video, where we will be discussing The Martian.
This has been FoxTales Movie Club. Thanks for watching. I'm Tony.
And I'm Fox, and we will see you in the next video.